times praying on this a few weeks ago, maybe. I was driving down the road and not thinking nothing about this precious couple, because I hadn't seen them for quite a while. I hadn't talked to them for quite a while. We used to be in church. I was serving in church in Terre Haute, and we were connected through there, and I've known them. They're great people. But anyway, so I wasn't thinking about them. Then, can you cut me down just a little more, brother? Still got a little bit of an echo. It's kind of just coming through these monitors, man. There you go. Thank you. And so, everybody hear me okay? Amen. So, anyways, I was driving down the road, and I was just, not thinking about this couple, really thinking about driving and where I was going, and the person in front of me, like you should be when you're driving. Amen. And so, all of a sudden, this precious lady, a dear friend of mine, comes up before me in my spirit, and she's standing in front of me, and she looks at me, and in the vision, she turns, and I'm looking at her back, and she starts walking backwards towards me. And as she gets closer to me, the Lord shows me something going on in her back. And I go, huh. And like a very spiritual person that I am, I blew it off and I drove on. Now listen to me tonight. You got to look for God in the little things, because He speaks in little ways. Amen? And so here in just a moment, I'm going to come and share with you her testimony of this. So one thing leads to another. And so a couple days later on social media, she puts a message on there that says something to the effect of, please pray for me. I have another back procedure in a few days. And I went, huh. Everybody say, huh. Because I knew, okay, God, what are you showing me here? So I got in contact with her and her husband, and we talked a little bit, and then wound up going over and praying for them and for her one evening. And basically, I'm going to ask her to come now, if you would, Sister Jenny, and share this testimony of what God did that night and what she's experienced the last few days. And I just want you to listen to this, because this goes right along with my sermon tonight. So, go ahead.
My name's Jenny Bogert, and we have a son who's 32 years old, 32 and a half years old. And when he was 4 days old, I was in the hospital when I was rocking him, and the chair collapsed. And we fell, and his head was right here in the crook of my arm. And we ended up the wall here, the floor here. And I honestly felt like that was God saying to me, understand that you're not going to protect him, I am. So that was, my beginning with my son was that God would be the one to protect him throughout his life. And he's had lots of ups and downs, but God is faithful. So for 32 and a half years, minus 4 days, for all that time, I have had back problems, because when I screamed, the nurses came running. When they got me up off the floor, they got me settled. I couldn't leave the hospital because my back was messed up from then on. I got home with him, and I couldn't bathe him. I couldn't lift him out of a playpen. I couldn't be a mom. Which I guess makes sense as to why God was saying, I'll take care of him, because I really couldn't. So time went on, and they, doctors said, it's because you're overweight, there's nothing wrong with you. And I knew there was, but I didn't know what it was. So as years went on, I was told that I had traumatized facet joints. And I learned that facet joints are down here in the bottom of your back. There's these joints called facets, and there are nerves that come out of them. And they ended up telling me that I had traumatized those joints. But there's nothing you can do for that. So time goes on. He's 17 years old, 18 years old, and I can remember one day, it got to the point where my back would go. I'm a teacher, and I would miss a week of work trying to get things back on track. They put me in therapy. At one point, I remember when Johnny called the ambulance for me, I was hanging on our back railing, screaming. We lived out in the country, fortunately, screaming at the top of my lungs because I couldn't move. And the ambulance came, and still screaming in the ambulance, and I'm saying, just give me something. They said, well, we can't just give you something. You know, we don't know what's wrong with you. Got to the hospital, they wanted to just send me on home. And they told my husband, they said, you're just gonna have to take her home. And he said, they brought her in an ambulance. And they said, well, ambulances run both ways. So that's been the journey that we've traveled for 32 and a half years. And several years ago, 6, 7 years ago, I was in the hospital, and they said, you know, this is never going to help you. Having physical, because every year or every couple of years I'd go through physical therapy and I'd get better, and then I'd look the wrong way, it would go. They said, this is never going to help you. And so I finally got desperate enough that I thought, I'm just going to have surgery. So they're just, whatever it takes, I can't do this anymore. So to a surgeon in Indianapolis, he said, this is not a surgical, there's no surgical fix for you. It's just not going to happen. But what we can do is I can hook you up with a pain management person. I said, fine. So back in about 2010, 11, I started going to a pain management doctor that he said, we can fix you up. What we'll do is we'll go in there and we'll burn those nerves. We'll just burn them. So they cauterized the nerves, and then the pain came back. And I called him and I said, how can I feel something if you burn the nerves? And he said, you know, about 1/3 of the people who have this procedure have to have it done a second time. So we went in and we burned the nerves again. And then I called him and said, okay, now why is it hurting? He said, well, because 1/3 of the 1/3 sometimes have to have it done a third time. So I went back and had it done a third time. And then when the pain came back, he said, I don't know. I don't know. But what we can do is we'll just start giving you epidural injections. And so I started going once a year to have epidurals, where they just go in and they just, I mean, that's what they give you when you have a baby, so it must be good stuff. So they started doing the epidurals. Then it got to where those were lasting a year, and then they weren't lasting a year anymore. They were lasting only 6 months. So I just turned 59 years old this week, and I've had this for 32 and a half years. I've had this, after God healed me, I thought, I've been in pain more than half my life. More than half of my life. So anyway, I had put on Facebook, and I have to say that over the years, people have prayed for me. Good Christians have prayed for me. Linda Morin has prayed for me. Visiting ministers have laid hands on me and prayed for me, and I don't believe that there was any farce or anything else on that. I just believe God was waiting until his perfect time. And I don't know why, but I don't need to know why. So a few weeks ago, I put on Facebook, going for yet another procedure on my back on Thursday. Please pray. I appreciate prayers. And this was on Thursday that I was going to go. Wednesday afternoon, he sends me a message and he said, listen, I know you're going for this procedure tomorrow, and I really need to talk to you because God has shown me something, and I just feel like we need to talk. And I said, sure. And I thought, well, you know, we can talk on the phone. I didn't want to infringe on his time, but I said, we can talk on the phone, or you're more than welcome to come over. And he said, I think I better come over. And I'm telling you, from that moment, it was like, okay, so what are you going to do? Cancel this? I mean, just that little whisper that Satan does. So you're going to cancel it now? You know, this doctor that you're just going to call and cancel your procedure? You can't do that. And what are you going to do if God heals you? How are you going to do that? Tell everybody, oh, God healed me, and then yet again, in another 6 months, say, oh, whoops. So the devil started doing that at me immediately. And I thought, nope, I'm going to wait and see what he has to say, because I'm not walking God. So God settled me while Satan's pecking at me. So Josh came over, and we talked and we prayed, and he told me about, you didn't mention the octopus. When he saw me, he saw an octopus on my back, like that tentacles into my back thing. So as we're talking that night, and he's telling me about what he had seen, and we're talking, and he said, you know, trauma. It's like your body has been through trauma. And I think God's showing me that we need to pray against that trauma. And I looked at my husband and I said, do you remember my diagnosis? And he went, no. And I said, traumatized facet joints. The joints in my back were traumatized, and over all these years, all these procedures, no one's ever really talked about how you deal with that, and he's telling me that God has shown him to pray for the trauma that my back went through. He started to pray, and in my mind I'm thinking, oh no, what if he heals me? I mean, what if God heals me? What am I going to do then? And then I, tamped that down. So he started to pray, and he said that about the trauma. He standing there, and I hadn't been in pain when he came, but I could feel things loosen with the specific, and that's, specific pinpointed prayer and knowledge, the knowledge that God gave him. And I'm not building him up as God, because God works through him. So all the praise and glory goes to God, and we both know that. But I am so thankful for people who allow God to use them as he has done. But he prayed for me, and I felt okay. I felt good. And it was like after midnight by the time he left our house. And so I'm healed. And I knew I was healed. I knew that I knew that I knew that I knew I was healed. After 32 and a half years. I mean, we cried, we laughed. It was awesome. And he left, and I sat down and I thought, okay, now what am I going to do? Because I can't go through with this procedure tomorrow, because that's a slap in the face to God. But I can't cancel it because it's the last minute. And then I started thinking, well, how could I lie about this? What could I tell the doctor's office why I have to cancel this? So I just picked up the phone, I called this woman, and I said, Tracy, you've scheduled me for 6-7 years. I'm just going to be honest with you. God's just healed my back. And I'm leaving this message at 2 o'clock in the morning. I said, God has healed my back. And I know this is an inconvenience, and I know, it's money out of his pocket for not being able to do this, but I feel like it would be a slap in the face to God if I went ahead with this procedure. I feel like it would be unbelief, and I can't do that. And I just hope I never see you again, but I love you dearly. Thank you. And I hung up, and the next morning, we're in bed asleep, phone rings, I said, hello, and I heard, and I said, hello? And she said, Virginia, I just got your message. She said, my 10-month-old grandchild is in the hospital with a horrible infection. I'm just exhausted caring for my other grandchild, and your message just reminded me that God has got this. Yeah. It was so awesome. I mean, I was scared to death, and God used that testimony, that very first little testimony, to touch this woman. So then I felt, like, okay, I did the right thing. And you know, we're grooving and going, and I put on Facebook real timidly, like, thank you for your prayers, but I canceled the procedure because God healed my back. And someone that I was pretty sure would respond in a snide way said, oh yeah, God healed my back too through a surgeon. LOL. And I thought, I rebuke that. I rebuked that. And I said, yes, I believe God uses all kinds of people, and he's used doctors with me before, but this time, God healed me. And I'm healed.